They were going to turn the machines off on Wednesday. The hall outside ICU 3 had smelled like lemon disinfectant and plastic tubing for so long it no longer registered. Even grief had quieted into protocol. The daughter came less often now, only stayed 10 minutes, left a bag of clean socks and pressed her father's wrist like it still meant something. "You always said not to be late," she whispered once, but he didn't stir. No one expected him to. 9 months was too long to believe in return. Not one eye in the hospital had seen hope in weeks. Except for one pair, small, steady, dark, like unlit coals. She came every day, just before visiting hours ended. Slipped past unnoticed, a wisp in a gray hoodie with sleeves too long and a recorder clutched in one hand. No name on file, no adult in tow. She never touched the door, never spoke to the nurses, never made trouble. She sat cross-legged against the wall, as if the cold tile had memory. And she hummed. No melody anyone recognized. A sound more like breath remembering how to be song. Soft, off-key, fragile, as if she were whistling through a hole in the world. At first, the staff called her that quiet kid. Some assumed she was waiting for someone. Others thought she was lost. No one stopped her. She didn't ask for anything. Just came. And stayed. And hummed. Always outside ICU 3, always the same broken lullaby. It was on a Monday that the night nurse heard something shift. Not in the monitors. They still blinked their indifferent red. But in the silence between them. The girl was humming again, except this time it wasn't shapeless. It had form. Shape. A note that curled back onto itself, like it remembered the next line. The nurse paused, suddenly cold, staring through the glass at the man on the bed. His name was Thomas. Once a music professor. Widowed 5 years. Slipped into a coma mid-lecture. His heart had held, but his mind had disappeared. That night, something moved. A twitch, not dramatic, not even certain, but a flicker of the right index finger, like a conductor's hand remembering how to begin. The nurse stepped back, told no one, just watched. The girl didn't react. She kept humming. She had a recorder, old and cracked at the edges, its batteries long dying, but it worked. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it just felt like it did. She would press play sometimes, let the faint hiss of static fill the hall. And within it, if you listened closely, was the ghost of a tune. Not music exactly, just rhythm. A heartbeat that forgot how to be heard. The girl would place the recorder beside her and tilt her head like she was listening to a memory only she could hear. No one knew who taught her the song. No one asked. But the daughter, on her next visit, stopped mid-step. She heard the sound, the hum, the drift, her face folded inward, eyes trembling. My mother sang that," she whispered. "Only once. The night he had to go, she made him promise not to forget." She didn't wait for a reply. She just sat on the floor beside the girl and cried. That night the monitors blinked again, but slower, softer, as if they were responding, like they had heard the promise too, like something inside the room had opened. When the girl left, she picked up her recorder like it was a relic. She nodded once to the wall, as if thanking it, and vanished into the hospital shadows. No one saw where she went. No one stopped her. They never did. But the silence she left behind was no longer heavy. It was listening. It was waiting. No charts could explain it. No scans, no pulse graph. But something was returning. Not to the body, to the room, like the air had remembered how to carry breath. Like the walls remembered a song they had forgotten. Or maybe they were just learning it for the first time. And down the corridor, in a hallway no one checked after hours, a girl with no name turned the recorder over in her hands and pressed play again. Not to hear it. but to believe it was still there. A promise, not made, but kept. The next morning, no one said her name, but everyone noticed she was there. Same corner, same slouch, same silence. Her hoodie sleeves tucked over her fingers, her head slightly tilted, as if listening to something far beyond the antiseptic hum of the hospital vents. Outside ICU 3, the world resumed its quiet erosion. Coffee cooled untouched, shift changes passed like ghosts, and inside the room, Thomas Vale remained motionless, except for the faint tremor in his index finger, now more frequent. Still small enough to doubt, still big enough to fear. A senior physician ordered a neuroscan. Muscle memory, he explained. Residual firing. Happens near the end. No one questioned it. That was the comfort of science. It didn't require belief, only evidence. But when the scan came back clean, no spikes, no clear signs of activity, they looked at each other with tight throats and said nothing. The girl hummed again that night. She didn't look at the room. She didn't even face it. She turned toward the vending machine across the hall, legs tucked under her like a prayer, and hummed like the sound was rising not from her mouth, but her chest. The kind of sound you make when your soul is trying to say something the world doesn't have a word for. It was the janitor who first stayed. He paused mid-mop, leaned his shoulder against the wall, and listened. Not politely, not curiously, but as if something in him had been waiting to hear it. He didn't say anything, just nodded once, eyes moist, and kept cleaning. Slower now, quieter. By Wednesday, the girl's presence was no longer dismissed. She was that kid by the ICU. Someone had started bringing her crackers. Someone else left a juice box by the bench. No one asked her who she was, but no one asked her to leave either. It was as if the hospital itself had grown used to her silence, like a missing note that somehow made the song complete. That was the day the daughter didn't come. And the girl noticed. She turned toward the door, as if expecting someone, then back toward the vending machine. She pressed play on the recorder. The static whispered. The song inside, fragmented, half lost, drifted out like breath on glass. She placed it on the floor, slid it forward slightly toward the ICU room, and sat perfectly still. Inside, the man in the bed stirred. Just once, a single shift in breath. The chest rose, then stuttered, then resumed. Alarms didn't go off. There was no blinking red, just the small sound of lungs remembering rhythm. A respiratory tech caught it mid-chart. He leaned in, adjusted a tube, frowned. The numbers didn't make sense. "It's not failing," he murmured. "It's following something." But what? That night, the lights flickered for less than a second. The ICU's backup power didn't engage. No codes were called. But something in the silence cracked open, and from the nurse's station, a tech whispered, "I think he blinked." The doctor on duty dismissed it. "You think you saw what you wanted to see?" But the nurse disagreed. She'd worked 20 years. She knew dying eyes. And that blink wasn't empty. It was focused. It was looking. And who was he looking at? The girl. The one no one knew. The one with the recorder, and the humming, and the stare like stone that had watched too much for someone so small. That evening, a physician finally approached her. "Do you know who's in that room?" The girl didn't answer. Just picked up the recorder, clutched it to her chest like something sacred, and stared ahead. "He was a teacher," the doctor said. "Used to teach music, wrote songs for his wife. She died a year before he collapsed. No family visits much now." The girl blinked once, not surprised, as if she already knew. She didn't say, "I know his name." She didn't say, I heard the story. She only whispered, like a breeze curling through broken windows. He promised her he'd remember. And the doctor, an atheist, a scientist, a man who had seen miracles fail and logic survive, felt his mouth dry. Because suddenly, it wasn't about medicine anymore. It was about memory. About how some melodies refuse to die, even when the body does. The next day, the daughter came again. She walked slower, eyes red. She carried no socks this time, only a letter. But before she reached the door, she saw the girl sitting outside, holding a folded note and an old recorder. The girl stood, quietly handed her both. The daughter unfolded the note. 7 words. He kept his promise. You can go now. The recorder clicked once. A woman's voice, raspy, distant, barely there, sang one line. Come back when the rain stops, love. The daughter dropped to her knees and sobbed. Inside, her father opened his eyes. Outside, the girl disappeared down the corridor. And no one followed. Because some songs are only meant to be heard once. By morning, the news had become a whisper too loud to ignore. Not an announcement, not a report, just glances exchanged over lukewarm coffee, a murmur from behind drawn blinds. He opened his eyes, but no one could agree on when or how, or, most painfully, why. The hospital staff began recounting details in fragments, not facts. He moved when she sang, one nurse said. It wasn't singing, the janitor replied. It was remembering. No, a technician insisted. It was just timing. Coincidence, the medication, the weather. But no one believed that, not really, especially not the doctor who had thrown out the DNR forms just 2 days earlier. He stood behind the glass that morning, arms crossed, staring at Thomas Vale like the man had betrayed science. Because the monitors still made sense, but the man didn't. He had blinked. He had spoken. Just one name. Hoarse and broken. Elena. His late wife. The man who hadn't spoken in 9 months now called for someone who hadn't drawn breath in 4 years. And the girl? She hadn't returned. No gray hoodie, no recorder, no humming down the corridor, just a silence heavier than before. And yet, not empty. The chair she once sat in remained untouched. No one dared sit there. The juice boxes stayed where they were, collecting condensation like offerings. Someone even swept around her corner instead of through it, as if she'd left an imprint not on the floor, but on their pattern of belief. Down in records, there was a problem. No login data. No security footage of her entering or leaving the building that day. The cameras near ICU 3 had glitched at 16:04, 3 seconds of static. When the frame returned, she was gone. As if she had never been. As if the song had finished and the echo had decided to leave with her. But people remembered her. The young nurse, still carrying the recorder she left behind, swore she wasn't imagining it. She handed this to me. It was warm, like it had just been used. Inside it? Only static. No song, no voice, just a soft rhythm, like a heartbeat buried in wind. And one small post-it note, wedged inside the battery slot. In slanted handwriting, a message: don't forget his song. Even if he does. No name, no signature. Later that evening, Thomas Vale sat upright for the first time in months. He asked for water, then a mirror. He stared at his own reflection as if trying to decide whether he believed it. The doctors asked questions. He couldn't answer them all. But when asked how he came back, he said, I didn't. Someone found me. Who? They asked. He paused, then pressed a hand to his chest and said, she knew the song. Not a name, not a face, just that. It was enough to silence the room. The hospital director called a board meeting. They reviewed protocols, demanded answers. How did a child enter a restricted area repeatedly without record? someone snapped. "Is this a breach of safety?" The head of security shuffled papers without speaking. A nurse murmured, "Maybe it wasn't safety that was breached. Maybe it was silence." They asked if anyone knew her name. No one did. They checked shelters, schools, group homes. Nothing matched. One social worker suggested maybe she wasn't real. Sometimes grief creates shadows. But someone else at the table, quiet, older, spoke up for the first time. "No. She was real. I gave her crackers. She said thank you, like it was a secret." They never found her. But things changed. Small things. The ICU hallway began to play soft music in the evenings, an instrumental piece no one claimed credit for uploading. The cleaning staff noticed folded notes taped under benches, lines from lullabies, most unsigned. A drawing appeared on the wall near ICU 3. A figure in a hoodie, holding a tape recorder, standing in front of a giant heart stitched together with thread. Patients asked who painted it. No one confessed. The janitor retired a month later. Before leaving, he left a quote on the staff fridge, scribbled on a napkin. "Sometimes the most powerful people don't have names. They have songs." And Thomas? He returned home. Not fully recovered, but present. He wrote music again. Simple things. One song in particular kept circling back, unfinished, repetitive, like something was still missing. A single measure that refused to complete. Until one morning the young nurse knocked on his door. "I think this belongs to you," she said, placing the recorder in his hand. He smiled. "No," he whispered. "It belongs to her." He pressed play, just static. And then, behind it, a faint voice, a girl's voice, singing one line. "Come back when the rain stops, love." He wept. Not because he understood, but because he finally didn't need to. The recorder sat on the mantel like a relic no one dared touch. Some days, Thomas would reach for it, pause, and pull his hand back. Not from fear, more like reverence, like the object held a piece of something so fragile it might crumble under expectation. The song wasn't always there. Sometimes all it played was wind. But on quiet mornings before sunrise, when the light was soft and didn't ask questions, the voice would return. Not full, not clear, but just enough. A breath of melody, a syllable drawn out too long, a child's voice wrapping around the name of someone who wasn't there anymore. "Come back when the rain stops." And sometimes it stopped raining inside him. The hospital had tried to move on. Protocols were rewritten, security systems updated, more cameras installed. But the real shift wasn't in policy. It was in posture. People moved slower now, gentler. The ICU wing had less noise, less of that clinical buzz that hummed like fluorescent lights in your bones. Nurses lingered longer at bedsides. Visitors sat in silence instead of scrolling, like the entire place was listening for something no machine could measure. A new patient arrived, a boy, maybe 10, unresponsive after an accident. His mother sat beside his bed, face blank, as if grief had hardened into a wall. Nurses offered tea. She shook her head. A social worker asked if she wanted music played in the room. She said, "No, he won't hear it." But one evening, she found a folded piece of paper tucked under the boy's pillow. On it, a single line. "Not all ears are on the outside." She asked who put it there. No one knew. But when she opened her phone that night, she found herself humming a tune she hadn't sung since her son was a baby. The next morning, the boy's hand twitched. Again, no science could confirm it. But people stopped needing science to explain everything. One night, during a staff change, the power blinked again. Just 1 second. Enough to reset clocks, enough to hush conversations. The backup didn't kick in, Nothing failed. Just silence. And in that silence, someone heard it again. Soft, like memory. A girl's voice, humming, just beyond the hallway, fading like a breeze slipping under a door. A young custodian chased the sound, turned every corner, opened every closet, found nothing, except a small smudge on the floor outside ICU 3. Not dirt, not grease. It looked like chalk. Faint, circular, a swirl, like a fingerprint left in light. He didn't tell anyone. He just sat there for a long time, not cleaning, just thinking. Thomas, meanwhile, had begun walking again. Slowly, unevenly, but walking. He took a notebook with him, jotted things down. Not words, not music, just shapes, curves, symbols. He said they helped him remember the parts she didn't sing. No one corrected him. One day, he asked the young nurse to bring a tape player to the hospital. The old kind, he said, with the soft buttons. He placed it on the bench where she used to sit, set the recorder inside, pressed play. Nothing happened, except the boy in room 6 stirred. The woman in 12, who hadn't spoken since her stroke, began mouthing syllables again. The clock at the end of the hall, broken for months, ticked once. That's when the hospital stopped asking what the device did. They began asking what it remembered. More letters appeared, slipped into coat pockets, taped under keyboards, hidden behind framed certificates in the staff lounge. One read, "She sang not because she knew the words, but because someone forgot how to." Another, "When you listen for her, don't expect music, expect memory." And one, folded so small it fit inside a pill cup, simply said, "Not everything that heals has a name." A rumor spread among the staff that the girl's name wasn't missing. It was never needed. She was the song, not the singer. The note, not the composer. The breath between verses. Thomas began composing again. Not for stage, not for anyone. Just for himself. But he always left the last measure blank. He said he was waiting. "When she comes back," he told the nurse, "she'll know how to end it." "Do you think she will?" the nurse asked one evening. He smiled, placing a hand gently over his chest, just above where the beat had once almost stopped. "She already has." It was a Tuesday when the chairman of the hospital board finally asked aloud what everyone had been thinking. "Are we talking about a child, or are we talking about something else?" No one answered. Not because they didn't know, but because they were starting to feel the answer wasn't theirs to give. The nurse who kept the recorder began sleeping with it on the nightstand, not because she believed in magic, but because she had run out of reasons not to. She said some nights, when the rain hit the window just right, she could hear the faintest harmony inside the static. Not a song. Not really. Just presence. Like someone small was sitting at the foot of the bed, waiting for you to remember what mattered. And still, no one saw her. No new sightings, no gray hoodie glimpsed around corners, no footprints in the hall. But the air hadn't returned to what it was. There was still a tension to it, soft, expectant, like a breath being held by the building itself. One evening, a new neurologist joined the team. Young, brilliant, data-obsessed. She read the patient files, saw the inconsistencies, and laughed under her breath. "I don't treat fairy tales," she said. That night, her computer froze 3 times. The lights in the staff lounge flickered once, exactly at 11:11. And when she sat alone reviewing MRI data, she found a sticky note tucked under her mug. No handwriting, just a drawn image. A single music note, bent downward, resting inside the outline of a heart. She didn't mention it the next day. She did, however, stop laughing. Elsewhere, in the farthest room of the long hallway, Thomas Vale had begun speaking in full sentences again. He had a ritual now. Every morning he would visit the bench she used to sit on, place a piece of sheet music there, blank except for one staff line, and whisper, "I saved a space for you." And then he'd wait. Not for a person, for an echo, for something, anything, that reminded him he hadn't imagined her. One morning there was a note folded beneath the sheet. "Some songs don't end, they wait." No signature, just the faint smell of citrus and rain. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm still listening." Elsewhere, someone restarted the old piano in the hospital chapel. It had been broken for years, too out of tune to use, but now a janitor swore he heard it play 2 notes, by itself, just before dawn. 2 soft notes, then silence. They called it a malfunction. He called it a reply. By now the staff had stopped debating. It wasn't about who the girl was anymore. It was about what she had left behind. The wake of her absence had become more powerful than her presence. She had cracked something open, not a machine, not a policy, something older, something like faith, something the doctors no longer argued about. At least not out loud. They still wore their coats, took their vitals, recited their codes, but in their pockets you'd sometimes find folded scraps of paper, notes they couldn't throw away, some with lines from lullabies, some with drawings of empty benches, some just blank, but folded, as if waiting for something to be written. One of them, found months later behind a vent grate near the staff lockers, said only this: "A system is only broken when it forgets how to feel." And when the head of administration read it, he didn't dismiss it. He sat down and cried. No one saw him do it. But someone left tissues beside his door the next morning. A juice box, too. The grape kind. He didn't ask where it came from. Somewhere beneath protocol, beneath metrics and funding cycles, the building had begun to breathe differently. Not louder, just softer. Like something had remembered how to exhale. And as for the girl, well, some said she never existed. Some said she was a spirit. Some said she was real once, long ago, and had simply returned for a moment when someone needed remembering. But those who believed didn't care what she was. They only cared that she had come, that someone had sat beside the dying and hummed them back to life, that someone had heard a song still playing in a body no one else believed in, that someone, small and forgotten, had restored something no monitor could measure, not a heartbeat, but a reason for it. And that was enough. It was nearly spring when the chapel filled again. Not with ceremony, not for a sermon, but because someone had wheeled the old professor down the hall and into the corner pew, the one that always stayed in shadow. No one invited him. No one told him he couldn't. He brought nothing but a worn staff book and a pencil without an eraser. When he opened the notebook, the pages fluttered like wings from being turned too many times. Every page was marked with lines he couldn't finish. Melodies that stopped mid-breath, measures that waited in silence. That morning the air in the chapel held the weight of something not quite memory, not quite prayer. Dust danced in the light like ash learning to rise. The room was empty, mostly, but the quiet wasn't hollow. It was full of pauses and promises, full of the space where her voice had once been. He began to write, slowly, like someone listening for footsteps before they stepped forward. He wrote 3 notes, paused, wrote 1 more, then stopped. The bench behind him creaked, but no one sat there. He smiled. Some silences were presence in disguise. Across the hospital, someone in room 11 woke for the first time in weeks and asked, without opening his eyes, "Was that singing?" His nurse, startled, replied, "No, sir. There's no music playing." He shook his head, lips cracked but smiling. "Not music, her." No one corrected him. They had stopped correcting people like him, because if the mind could invent pain, perhaps it could also invent peace. And perhaps, just perhaps, peace was a real thing that didn't need to be proven to exist. Later that day, the young nurse visited the staff lounge, placed a new sticky note on the wall. It simply read, "Maybe she came for him, but she stayed for all of us." No one signed it. No one took it down. And every week, someone else added a line beneath. Not poems, not confessions, just fragments. She hummed like memory. She never asked for anything. She gave me back my father. She taught me to wait. I still set out a seat. By month's end, the wall was full, and not a single word was crossed out. One night, a power outage cut the entire floor to black for exactly 18 seconds. No emergency lights, no backup generator hum, just pitch darkness and breath. 18 seconds. Then, the hallway speakers, long disconnected, crackled on. Just once, and through them, one soft note, just one. Clear, clean, unmistakable. A G above middle C. Then silence returned. But it wasn't frightening. It was sacred. Like the building itself had remembered something it had no words for. The board tried to investigate. Audits were run, logs were checked. But the system showed no activation. "No signal transmitted," the report read. "No source detected." The technicians shook their heads. The janitor, sweeping nearby, simply muttered, "Not everything that plays comes from speakers." In the following days, something else began to change. Doctors, once hurried, slowed at the end of their shifts to walk the ICU wing without a chart in hand. Volunteers brought books to read aloud, just in case. Security guards nodded at empty corners like they were greeting someone who might return. And Thomas Vale? He returned to the chapel again. This time he carried a single sheet of music, only one. He placed it on the bench where she used to sit. He didn't try to finish the melody. He just left it open. Then, gently, he placed his hand over his chest, closed his eyes, and whispered, "I kept it warm for you." The lights flickered. Not out, just dimmed, like the room itself was bowing its head. In another room, the nurse pressed play on the recorder once more. Static, then breath, then, "Come back when the rain stops, love." The power of it wasn't in the words. It was in the way her voice made the silence afterward feel like something had landed, like something had settled in, like someone had come home. And as the hallway filled with the sounds of footsteps and muted machines, a small wind passed through the automatic doors that hadn't opened. No one saw it, but everyone felt it, like a presence passing through them, like the ending of a promise, or the beginning of another. They didn't call it a miracle. They called it her. Spring arrived quietly, as if it didn't want to disturb what had settled. The cherry tree outside ICU 3, long thought dead, bloomed. Not spectacularly. Not enough to draw a crowd. Just a single branch, pale pink against the hospital's cold gray wall. The kind of bloom that looks accidental, like the wind whispered something, and the tree remembered how to answer. No one mentioned it. But someone began placing a small paper cup of water at the base every morning. It was always gone by nightfall. Inside, Thomas Vale no longer composed. He listened. Each morning he sat at the chapel's old piano, touched the keys softly. Not to play, but to feel their temperature. Some days they were warm, as if someone had played them just before he arrived. Other days, he would sit for an hour without touching a note. And still, he left lighter. "I don't write the music anymore," he once told the nurse. "I wait for it to arrive." The staff didn't use her name, because she'd never given one. But they spoke of her like someone who'd lived among them. Not as a myth, not as legend, but as presence, as pause, the girl who never explained, never asked, just appeared when something inside someone was about to vanish, and gave it back. One afternoon, a woman arrived at the front desk, mid-40s, hands worn from work, voice soft like gravel in water. She clutched a photo. A little girl, about 9, in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, holding a recorder like a relic. "Have you seen her?" she asked. Her name was Amari. She used to sing with her mother, before the fire. The nurse on duty stared at the image, her heart suddenly still. "How long ago?" The woman's voice cracked. 5 years. Silence fell like snow. The nurse asked gently, "Why are you looking now?" The woman didn't answer. She just pulled from her coat a folded piece of paper, creased and yellowed with age. It was a song, scrawled in a child's handwriting. 4 words repeated over and over. "Come back when the rain stops." The nurse didn't cry. She only reached into her drawer, took out the recorder, and placed it carefully into the woman's hands. "Sometimes," she said, "they come home in pieces." The woman turned it over. Pressed play, static, then nothing. Then a breath, a hum, a child's voice, soft, uncertain, but still singing. The woman closed her eyes. She didn't speak again. She only held the recorder to her chest and whispered, "You remembered." That night, someone left a new note on the wall in the staff lounge. She wasn't lost, she was listening. Months passed. The sticky notes faded. The piano went out of tune again. The hallway filled once more with everyday things: coffee orders, test results, forgotten clipboards. But the bench outside ICU 3 was never used again. Not out of fear, out of respect. It belonged to someone, or maybe to everyone. The hospital moved on, the way things do. New patients came, some left, some didn't. New staff rotated in, some never heard the story. But the tone lingered, like the final note of a song still hanging in the rafters, long after the singer is gone. And in the chapel, behind the piano, a blank sheet of music still sits. Unfinished. Not because it's incomplete, but because it's waiting. One day maybe someone else will sit there, someone small, quiet, carrying nothing but a song they don't know they remember, and they'll hum, not for applause, not for healing, but simply because something inside them knows how to. And when that happens, no one will interrupt. No one will ask questions. They'll just listen, because now they understand. Some melodies don't end. They return. When the rain stops, and the world is quiet enough to hear them again.